Commissioner Gordon, Bane has escaped.
There's a certain fire that only burns when you remove safety nets. When you strip your life of alternatives, you awaken something ancient inside you, the primal instinct that turns survival into clarity. Most people fail not because they lack potential, but because they keep a back door open. They plan for failure before they've even fought for victory. That quiet preparation to retreat becomes prophecy. You cannot build empires with hesitation. You cannot change your life while protecting comfort. The mind only operates at its highest capacity when it knows there is no fallback. When there's nowhere to run, every step forward becomes a demand, not an option. That's when you meet the version of yourself that doesn't negotiate with fear, the one who refuses to break because there is no one left to pick up the pieces. Plan B is where dreams go to die disguised as logic. It gives you the illusion of wisdom, but it's just permission to quit politely. People tell you to be practical, to hedge your bets, to think realistically. But realism is often cowardice dressed in intellectual clothing. The truth is, when you divide your focus, you dilute your fire. The universe doesn't reward half-hearted effort. It bends to those who move with absolute commitment. When you eliminate the second option, you eliminate hesitation. Energy that once leaked into doubt now concentrates into execution. That intensity cannot be replicated by comfort. You either go all in or you stay ordinary forever. The human brain was built for survival. When it senses backup, it relaxes. When it knows it can escape, it never fully fights. This is why people plateau. They never let themselves need victory badly enough. But the moment you corner yourself against the wall of necessity, instinct sharpens. Focus becomes survival. Creativity awakens. When failure means hunger, your thoughts become ruthless. When success is the only way out, you find moves you never knew existed. History's greatest creators, leaders, and fighters all understood one truth: the absence of alternatives breeds brilliance. Pressure refines the soul. Security softens it. There's something sacred about committing to a single path without a parachute. It feels terrifying, but that fear is the birthplace of identity. You begin to see who you are when you can't rely on excuses. When you burn the bridge, you stop looking back. When you stop looking back, you finally move forward. The greatest clarity comes not from options, but from elimination. Every other route you erase becomes energy redirected into the one that matters. That's why obsession is often mistaken for madness. It's not insanity, it's singularity. The world calls it reckless. Those who have done it call it necessary. The reason people cling to backup plans is not intelligence, it's disbelief. They don't trust themselves enough to handle uncertainty. They want success, but they don't want to risk humiliation. Yet greatness and humiliation are twins. You can't have one without the other. You must be willing to look foolish before you look formidable. You must walk alone before anyone applauds your courage. Plan B is the comfort of those who fear transformation. It keeps you grounded when you were born to ascend. Every legend had a moment where there was nothing but a single direction and the conviction to keep walking it. That moment separates the believers from the doubters. Burnout does not come from effort. It comes from divided effort. When half your energy goes into what you want and the other half into protecting what you fear, you end up exhausted and empty. Full commitment simplifies life. It makes choices clear. You no longer wake up wondering what if. You wake up knowing what must be done. The absence of options makes discipline automatic. You no longer rely on motivation because survival doesn't need emotion. It needs movement. When you have no backup, every second becomes sacred. Every decision carries weight. That weight breeds excellence. You'll never know what you're capable of until failure has consequences. Comfort shields you from discovery. It keeps your potential locked behind padded walls. When there is no plan B, the brain stops negotiating. It stops waiting for the right time. It begins to create. It begins to hunt. The pulse quickens. The body adapts. The mind aligns. You start operating at the frequency of necessity, where there's no time for doubt. It's the most honest version of existence, a place where instinct meets intelligence. The problem is that most people never experience it because they always give themselves somewhere to hide. When you commit entirely, you scare people. Your certainty exposes their hesitation. They'll call you obsessed, arrogant, or unrealistic, but their opinions are projections of their own fear. The path without backup is not meant to be understood. It's meant to be walked. You won't find encouragement there. You'll find silence, pain, and resistance. But that's where conviction is built. The absence of applause is the test. Can you still move when the world doubts you? Can you still build when no one watches? That's what separates creators from talkers. You can't fake consistency when there's no alternative. The phrase, "no plan B," is not about recklessness. It's about self-respect. It means you trust your vision enough to bet your entire existence on it. It means you refuse to fragment your energy across outcomes that don't align with your purpose. It's about betting on your potential like your life depends on it, because it does. The greatest tragedy is not failure. It's mediocrity preserved by safety. The person who never risks never learns who they could have been. You're not meant to survive comfortably. You're meant to evolve relentlessly. The discomfort of commitment is the birthplace of all transformation. When there's nowhere left to run, the mind stops negotiating. When you remove the backup plan, biology takes command. The moment the brain registers there is no alternative, something ancient inside you wakes up. Adrenaline floods your system. Clarity cuts through the fog. Every irrelevant impulse is erased. The body becomes a weapon designed for a single purpose: survival through execution. That state of being is not metaphorical, it's physiological. The human body is engineered to perform miracles when cornered. It doesn't think, it acts. Every ounce of energy once wasted on doubt is redirected into precision. That is the primal intelligence that still sleeps inside most people, waiting for the moment they remove the escape route and finally mean it. Hesitation is the byproduct of safety. When the brain knows there's a way out, it withholds power. It saves energy for the backup route. It second guesses because it believes there's time to hesitate. Remove the exit, and that illusion collapses. The entire system shifts from preservation to production. You don't think about outcomes anymore. You think about motion. Fear and focus become the same sensation, a sharp, burning clarity that heightens every sense. That's when your potential stops being abstract. It becomes instinct. You see angles that were invisible before. You feel time slowing, decisions sharpening, execution becoming effortless. The body adapts to necessity faster than it adapts to comfort. People confuse confidence with certainty. Real confidence comes from pressure. It's not about feeling ready. It's about having no other choice but to be ready. When your back hits the wall, your nervous system deletes luxury. Every heartbeat becomes a countdown. Every breath turns into purpose. This is not motivation, it's biology rewriting its own hierarchy. Adrenaline pushes oxygen to your brain. Cortisol wakes your awareness. The prefrontal cortex stops wandering and locks onto the immediate task. That is what 300% focus feels like, your brain deciding that doubt is unaffordable. You don't rise to the occasion. You return to what nature intended you to be, fully alive under pressure. Cutting the exit is the ultimate trigger for transformation. It removes the illusion of time. When there's no way out, effort becomes automatic. The mind doesn't debate the cost, it calculates survival. Every neuron aligns behind the next action. It's not poetic, it's chemical. This is how warriors, entrepreneurs, and creators bend reality. Not through magic, but through biology. They create artificial corners. They make quitting impossible. They starve the option to retreat until the only direction left is forward. In that tunnel, the brain stopped if and starts answering, what now? That's the moment life begins to obey you. Modern life trains you to overthink, to delay, to prepare endlessly before moving. But nature has a different code. It rewards immediacy. When you step into the unknown and close every back door, the body obeys that message. Your heartbeat accelerates, your pupils dilate, your mind sharpens. You become the most efficient version of yourself. The primitive wiring that once hunted in jungles now hunts goals in silence. Comfort softens that system. Danger activates it. The very chemical that once helped your ancestors survive predators can help you conquer opportunity, but only if you have the courage to trigger it. The fear of failure vanishes when failure means extinction. That's why people who burn their ships always win. Their nervous systems stop reserving energy for safety. There's a purity in desperation. It's not panic, it's performance. The moment you tell your body that there's no exit, it starts manufacturing strength. It releases hormones, accelerates reaction times, and pushes focus into narrow corridors of purpose. That's how soldiers in chaos act with precision, how athletes in finals perform beyond logic, how creators finish masterpieces in the quiet hours before deadlines. The brain is not your enemy. It's waiting for proof that you're serious enough to demand all of it. Most people never experience their full capacity because they always keep comfort within reach. They live in partial commitment. Half-hearted pursuits create half-activated minds. They don't realize that the human body is designed to awaken only under intensity. Without it, potential stays dormant. You cannot access your highest performance while protecting your safety. The door you leave open for failure is the same one through which discipline escapes. Close it, and something divine begins to build inside you. A rhythm, a flow, a brutal kind of focus that terrifies comfort and seduces progress. Pressure is not punishment. It's the proof of life. When the body enters fight mode, everything becomes immediate. The noise of the world fades. Time bends around your determination. In that heightened state, you feel what freedom actually means. Not escape from difficulty, but complete submission to purpose. People spend their lives chasing that feeling through external rewards, but it only appears when you destroy the illusion of choice. You were never meant to be calm. You were meant to be clear. Calmness is comfort, clarity is control. The greatest mistake you can make is to build a plan that includes retreat. It sounds intelligent, but it's poison to conviction. You cannot plan to win while secretly preparing to surrender. The nervous system detects dishonesty even when the mind denies it. That inner conflict splits focus. You either demand total alignment from your body and mind, or you settle for mediocrity disguised as balance. When you finally cut the backup plan, the mind unifies. It commits fully, not by belief, but by biology. That unity is where creation happens. There comes a point when you've given too much to turn back. When your sweat has stained the path and your blood has sealed your commitment. That moment is called the sunk cost advantage. It's the point of no return, where quitting hurts more than continuing. Most people never reach it because they pull out too early, afraid of losing what they've already poured in. But those who stay long enough to feel that pressure discover something rare. Their brain starts rewarding them for persistence itself. the chemistry changes. The dopamine no longer depends on victory. It begins to feed on motion. That's the transformation from dependence to self-propulsion, from chasing reward to embodying it. When you invest deeply enough, effort becomes pleasure. It sounds paradoxical, but it's the highest form of focus. The body learns that the act of pushing forward is its own reward. There's no more chasing validation, no more needing applause. You begin to crave progress like oxygen, not because someone will see it, but because you feel alive in the act of earning it. That's the secret architecture behind mastery. When dopamine attaches itself to effort, you can't be stopped. You've crossed the line where motivation no longer comes from outside, where you no longer need the world to clap before you act. You move because you must. You endure because the process itself is nourishment. The sunk cost advantage turns pain into power. Every failure, every late night, every hour spent alone in silence becomes a deposit in an account that now pays interest in discipline. When you've sacrificed too much, the mind refuses to make it meaningless. The more you've given, the more you must continue, and that paradox becomes strength. You are no longer trying to prove anything. You're preserving the value of your own suffering. That's what most people never understand. The deeper the investment, the heavier the meaning. When you've bled for something, quitting becomes unthinkable. Not because you're fearless, but because you've fused with the mission itself. There's a biochemical rebellion that happens when the reward system detaches from outcome. The brain stops waiting for external confirmation and begins releasing dopamine for consistency. You become addicted to showing up. The satisfaction shifts from finishing to enduring. Every rep, every paragraph, every trade, every risk, they all release the same signal. That's how the body trains itself to love difficulty. It's how you turn stress into stamina. You no longer chase the finish line, you chase the feeling of becoming unstoppable. That's how self-mastery is born, through thousands of repetitions rewarded internally, not publicly. Quitting feels rational until you realize that it erases every ounce of meaning you've built. The sunk cost is not a trap, it's a test. It asks whether you are capable of holding your ground when the progress slows, when the applause fades, when the world looks away. Most give up at the edge of breakthrough because they confuse fatigue for failure. They think effort should feel rewarding from the start, not realizing that the reward grows from endurance itself. You must outlast the pain long enough for the brain to switch allegiance. From that moment on, you no longer need permission to continue. The system has rewired itself for persistence. No retreat changes the meaning of motivation. When there's no way out, every ounce of effort is multiplied. You begin to operate under a new logic, survival through purpose. You no longer waste mental energy negotiating whether it's worth it. The cost is already paid, the decision already made. That commitment eliminates internal conflict. Focus sharpens, discipline steadies, and dopamine flows to movement, not milestones. The mind becomes an engine running on its own fuel. That is the biological signature of total commitment, the moment where forward motion becomes self-sustaining. You can tell when someone has crossed that threshold. Their energy feels different. They don't need to explain themselves. They don't talk about potential. They move through pain like it's home. That's the sunk cost advantage in human form. They've suffered too much to return to mediocrity. They've invested too deeply to betray their own history. Every obstacle becomes proof of their evolution. They don't need shortcuts because they've already learned the secret that permanence is purchased through persistence, not perfection. When you reach that level, motivation no longer feels like emotion, it feels like gravity. Every great story has a point where the hero loses everything but the will to continue. That's where transformation begins. The loss strips the ego, the fatigue strips the comfort. What remains is raw conviction, the refusal to make suffering meaningless. The brain, sensing no retreat, adapts. It begins to reward the act of endurance, to translate pain into purpose. That's not theory, it's chemistry. Evolution designed it that way. We were built to grow through strain, not to collapse under it. The sunk cost advantage is the point where biology bows to belief. When you've gone too far to quit, you begin to operate in rare air. The fear of loss disappears because you've already lost the illusion of safety. All that remains is forward motion. The body becomes efficient, the mind minimal, the heart defiant. You don't ask how long it will take anymore. You ask how far you can go. You no longer crave results because effort itself has become ecstasy. That's the highest form of freedom, when action becomes its own addiction. That's what separates the chosen from the comfortable. Flow begins where self-awareness ends. That's the paradox of mastery. You stop performing for yourself and start merging with the task. The mind becomes quiet, not empty. The chatter, the judgment, the fear of failure, all dissolve under the gravity of pure action. When the prefrontal cortex slows, time stretches. The body moves faster because the mind stops interrupting. You're no longer thinking about doing, you're simply doing. Every decision feels inevitable. Every movement feels automatic. That is the state where effort disappears, but execution peaks. It's not motivation anymore. It's momentum sculpted into precision. That silence is the most dangerous weapon in existence because it produces clarity beyond thought. People talk about discipline like it's about forcing action, but real discipline is about dissolving interference. You train so relentlessly that action becomes instinct. You repeat until thinking becomes redundant. Flow doesn't come from chaos, it comes from pattern carved deep enough that hesitation can't survive. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-awareness, finally gets out of the way. The brain stops analyzing and starts operating. You lose yourself in the process, and in that loss, you find your highest performance. When there is no plan B, the brain surrenders to the rhythm of necessity. It has no room for doubt, no oxygen for distraction. Only the next move exists, and it exists completely. The beauty of that state is that it feels effortless while being the product of endless preparation. Flow doesn't belong to beginners. It rewards those who've mastered the fundamentals so deeply that their mind trusts the body to take over. That's why repetition matters. Every repetition is a rehearsal for silence. Every correction is a step toward freedom. When you've trained long enough to trust your instincts, you stop fighting for control. You become it. The conscious mind, the part obsessed with safety, disappears. The unconscious, the part that knows without words, rises. That's when plana stops being a plan and becomes identity. In flow, the concept of failure vanishes because awareness of outcome dissolves. You're not doing the thing for reward. You are the thing being done. The split between you and your craft ceases to exist. The archer becomes the arrow. The writer becomes the page. The trader becomes the market. The athlete becomes the motion. This merger is what most never taste, because they never silence themselves long enough to reach it. They want results while still clinging to control. But flow is born from surrender, not to weakness, but to rhythm. The mind's surrender births the body's dominance. Plan A demands that level of surrender. It requires you to enter the tunnel where no commentary exists. The voice that says, "What if?" must die. The need for reassurance must be buried. When all alternatives vanish, the mind stops scanning for escape. It drops into presence so complete that nothing else exists. The prefrontal cortex, once obsessed with identity and fear, goes dark. The silence that remains is not emptiness, it's power without noise. In that void, execution becomes instinctual, and instinct becomes unstoppable. The longer you live in that state, the more the world bends around your precision. Flow cannot coexist with doubt. Every time you hesitate, you interrupt the rhythm. Every time you self-analyze, you fracture the moment. The greatest performers understand this, that mastery is the ability to silence the internal observer. You don't think about how to breathe, you just breathe. You don't think about how to move, you just move. That is where progress accelerates beyond logic. The speed of thought slows you down. The speed of instinct sets you free. The prefrontal quiet is not a weakness. It's an upgrade, the brain optimizing for motion rather than reflection. The modern world suffocates flow because it glorifies constant awareness. Every notification, every noise, every mirror of comparison pulls you back into self-consciousness. You can't access your highest potential while constantly measuring it. To enter flow, you must protect silence like oxygen. You must carve time away from the noise, from the screens, from the validation loops that train you to perform for others instead of performing for purpose. Flow begins where observation ends. It demands solitude, focus, and the absolute rejection of distraction disguised as connection. When flow takes over, the body moves faster than thought can follow. You begin to operate with a sense of inevitability, like every choice is pre-written by precision. That's why great fighters, writers, and musicians describe it as transcendence, not spiritual, but biological.